This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Well, Steve, let's get an introduction, because we've been talking for a while now, and this people hearing your voice probably going, well, who the hell is that? So,
that's what everybody says.
You do a podcast called Sweet Child of Time.
Correct, yeah.
It sounds like you're into music, and you live in Virginia, and we had a long conversation, and I didn't record any of it. So can you summarize that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. I'm a Virginian, grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and I work all across the state of Virginia as a utility operator for water and wastewater. And growing up, my job, me and Seth were talking about how I worked in Applebee's. I was a bartender, waiter. So
the food service experience.
Yeah, related with you guys with that in the early days of the podcast. I met my wife at Applebee's. This was back in 19. Yeah. 1998.
In the 1900s.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Way back when. So yeah, we've been together since then. We have 2 kids, and I started around 2019. I've always played music. I've always been a musician, always been in bands around Richmond since I was a kid. I've helped recorded albums, which is kind of how I got into podcasting easily, because I've been on 2 albums and helped record those albums with the drummer and doing all like recording on DAT tape, recording on cassette tape, recording on computer, using Cubase, then eventually Audition. It's all the same with podcasting. I mean, it's mixing, getting your sound right, getting everything good. So 2019 is when I started doing things on my own. That's when I was like, no more bands, no more bullshit. Just like, I'm going to do what I want to do and do my music. And I had a friend, James McCullum, known as the rapper Marshland Monster. He helped me get my music published and, out there on Spotify and Apple and all that. And then he also had me on his podcast to promote my music. And so that's when I got the podcasting bug, because I went on a bunch of podcasts, promoting my album. And I just loved it so much. I was like, James, let's do a Wheel of Time podcast. Let's watch the TV show Wheel of Time. He didn't know anything about the Wheel of Time, just that he knew it was a TV show that looked interesting to him. And me, I was like, yeah, I've read all these books, a couple of times, and I know about this world. Let's do it. So we started my podcast, Sweet Child of Time. The official title, let me get this straight, Sweet Child of Time, 1899, Dark, and Wheel of Time TV recaps. It's a very long title, but it's necessary because you got to type all that in to find it. I'm a hobbyist, so my podcast is not huge.
You get a very narrow niche.
We had a lot of trouble for a while. People would type Wheel of Time spoilers, and they wouldn't get our podcast. You actually had to type WoTSpoilers to get to it for a long time. And I think that was a failure of keywords on my part.
I learned that trick with you guys' podcast too, because I had a hard time as well finding it. And as a matter of fact, speaking of the word Wheel of Time spoilers, back when my first album, one of the tracks is called Wheel of Time Spoilers. And I'm sorry I did that. It probably messes up y'all's algorithm too. But I did a cover version of y'all's theme song. The real moody theme song you guys intro and outro with. I love it. So we were playing it at band practice one day, and so I recorded it and released it, put it on the album. So I'm helping with that.
It's fun though. I've listened to that track, and it's a very moody take. It's so like, it's like, when you take an instrument and put it into a song and put it into a completely different instrument or a different key, and it's familiar, but it's off. It's surreal after how often I've heard it, like the one way, and then I listened to your version. I was like, I like it, but also I hate it. The autism hates it. We hate it, Precious. So good job with that.
Yeah, I recorded that on cassette. That's when I was doing cassette recording. So that whole album was recorded via cassette. And since then, I've transferred to everything is, digital. I'm in the real world now. My last couple albums have all been digital.
Oh, that's very cool. I'm not good with the sound engineering stuff, but my mom and stepdad are musicians and have put out a couple of their own albums in home studios. And my stepdad has aspired mightily to teach me how sound engineering works. And I know a few things, mainly how to coil cables. But it's funny how many podcasters come from sound engineering, sound design, music in general. So many of the people I have tried to learn podcasting stuff from, that's where they come from. I'm like, damn it, I wish I had been able to absorb that stuff my stepdad was so desperately trying to teach me. That's very cool.
I feel like you have a baseline of just good sound quality. You know how to at least create a good sound quality, record your voice, and edit something and put it out, right? Like, and that baseline gives you a real head and shoulders head start above people who are starting their first episode, and they sound like they're talking through a gramophone, you know, and they're just unlistenable. And it's amazing how quickly you lose listeners. And then that, I feel like that turns into this discouraging turn down of like, well, no one's even going to give you a chance, especially when your first episode sounds like crap. You know?
Yeah.
A good way to do that is to practice reading, I've found, because I was fortunate when I started at the utility company that I'm at now. I've been working there since 2000. And when we started with technology, we started doing robocalls. Like when we were going to have like an outage or we were flushing water somewhere, we would send out a robocall and it would be me that would do it. So I would have to talk in a very pleasant, my voice now. So that's where I learned like to listen to my voice and not hate it quite so much, because I was doing this all the time and all the customers knew my voice, and like, they would meet me and they would be like, you're the guy on the call. And I'm like, that's me. So that's kind of how I got used to my voice. But I want to bring it back around to how I came to this podcast here.
Sure. Yeah.
Is sure. My Wheel of Time history is I started up with Wheel of Time. I have the receipts to prove it. In July of 2016, a very kind Redditor named Adam, we were conversing about how I was at a standing point with Game of Thrones. I had nowhere to go with Game of Thrones at that point. I wanted to continue with fantasy.
Sure.
And everybody was recommending Wheel of Time because of the obvious similarities. So I was on board. Adam, in July of 2016, sent me an email PDF of all the books, like all in one big email. So those are still the PDFs I'm reading to this day, is Adam's PDFs that he sent me of Wheel of Time. I bought the hard copies, of course, too, because I like
evangelism. Have the Bible.
Oh, we did the same thing on our podcast too. We gave away the like my co-host James found a bunch of Wheel of Time books in one of those corner libraries, snatched them up, and we had a contest and gave away the Wheel of Time paperbacks at one point. But back to you guys, 2016, I started reading it, and I read it the first time through with no internet help, not talking to anybody. So a lot of stuff really went over my head. When I read it for the second time, because the first time, I admit, I was looking for podcasts to listen to. I don't think you guys were around in 2016 at the time.
No, it started in 2017.
Because there wasn't anything to listen to at that time, right? Yeah.
Right. I was listening to Everybody Hates Rand and I don't know, The White Tower, I think was a podcast at the time. I was just listening to whatever I could, but some stuff was spoilery. And at one point, y'all came up and y'all came across my feed. And I was like, I can't listen to that because it's spoilers.
It's in the name.
So my second read through is when I was with you guys, but only for about the first book, because that's where you guys were at the time. I charged ahead and kept rereading. By the time I came back around again, there was this new person on this podcast named Aradia. And so I got to go back and listen to some of Aradia's episodes. So, I've listened to... I absolutely listened to all your episodes through at least book 5.
Wow.
So there's some stuff here and there that I've listened to randomly, but that's my favorite thing is to I read a chapter every night of Wheel of Time, or a part of a chapter, I should say. That's my habit. Listen to black metal in my headphones, read some Wheel of Time. It has to be Wheel of Time. It can't be anything else. And that's how I fall asleep. And then the next morning, whatever chapter I listen to, tune into some Wheel of Time spoilers from way back in the day.
That's immensely flattering.
I can't wait to be synced up with you guys. It's gonna be awesome.
That's an amazing way to do it. I love that.
That's very sweet.
Thanks for sharing. That's such a unique way to have someone be absorbing the podcast.
Yeah. Well,
and also just how much the book helps everyone. A lot of people I know fall asleep. There's a certain amount of it calms our brains in a way. Those of us who are especially a little different in the brains might need some extra calming down at night. It's okay, if I'm thinking about the Wheel of Time, I'm not worrying about my job and the dishes and the conversations I had earlier today that I'm replaying over and over in my head and practicing for tomorrow. And instead, I'm doing the Wheel of Time. And then my brain can be like shutting down because the Wheel of Time doesn't need my attention as much.
Yeah, now that I've started doing it, I'll never be able to stop for the
It's
rest
so
of my
hard.
life.
It's so hard. God.
Yeah.
And I've adapted to some other books. I've been able to do some other reading and fall asleep to that, but still, Wheel of Time is always works. Speaking of making an episode, are we ready to talk about a Manufactury?
Yes.
Have you guys ever been to a tea manufactory?
No.
I went to Boulder, Colorado once, and that's where the Celestial Seasonings tea factory is.
Love that
And you
stuff.
can take tours of it, and you get to see their whole processing plant and their packaging plant, and like they have the mint specifically behind a very, very well sealed door.
Because
Because otherwise the entire rest of the warehouse will taste of mint. Everything else in there will end up tasting of mint if it is not kept sealed away. But yeah, if you've ever been to that factory or any other tea-like factory, that's what I imagine this is like. I mean, they describe it pretty well, but especially when they describe the mint smell, I'm reminded of when they cracked the door on the mint room just so we could get a sense of how overpowering it was. And like, I hate mint. I am one of those people who absolutely would yeet mint into the sun if it was an option.
Yeah, same. Yes, I'm with you.
Oh, thank you. I meet so few people who know that mint is actually the true devil's lettuce. When they cracked that door,
No good for nobody.
I'm a take it or leave it type person. Like, for the most part, I don't enjoy it. But, if you put it in something, it's fine.
It's not fine.
I've learned that there are some contexts with lamb that do call for mint. There are some lamb dishes that do call for mint. But that is it. That is the only acceptable time.
I'm picturing this manufactory more like, I remember seeing the movie with Chris Rock, like way back when in the 80s, and they had like a crack factory, and there was like, a bunch of people were like, making illegal crack, like in a rundown factory. And for some reason, that's where my mind went when I was reading this, as like an illegal like drug factory, maybe making fentanyl or something like that. I mean, I know this is more well run, but that's what I thought of.
Sure.
Well, and I even go back to like forkroot is frankly a better match for marijuana. We always joke about Two Rivers Tobacco being marijuana, right? But if you really want to like talk about the effects of this drug, right? Something you can make into a tea that can make people sleepy, react a little slow. Maybe people who are magic react in a special way to it and are more sensitive and they actually pass out. Like, I mean, it's just honestly like, has anyone tried smoking this stuff? Like, is this
That's a really good point.
It's a better match in the world for a much more active drug than something like Two Rivers Tobacco, which is much more of it is tobacco, right? Like,
yeah, literally, it is. It is.
It is, but I've always been with you about the Two Rivers Tobacco, like with the weed thing, because that's funny.
Yeah.
But with this stuff, the way it acts, I think of it like it is more CBD than THC. Because I don't think it really makes you. Well, I guess it does make you
It's
sleepy,
like a body high,
but it doesn't
deals with pain.
or maybe
Well, that's definitely
maybe
THC
more like
right
an
there.
opioid, maybe like a
Indica,
opium den
Sure.
type, like because comes from flowers in a plant, and right, like they're harvesting the sap on that, right? Like so. Right.
I think I've got it. Two Rivers Tobacco is sativa.
All right, there we go.
Forkroot is indica.
There we go. We've cracked the code.
Either way, Perrin's walking in like half baked and ordering all of it, right? Like he's just absolutely coming in. He's just and he's got the special note from the doctor that says, just give me all of it, and that's what this chapter is about.
Yeah. Also, there's beetles.
Oh well, yes.
There's Beatles. And Ty Lee gets a hookup too, because like otherwise she would not have gotten any of her supplies if it wasn't for Perrin being with her. So she gets a little bit of that runoff as well.
Trickle down economics.
Yeah.
Steve, do you want to read us in?
Me?
Yeah, we always I love making the guests do it. It's my favorite thing.
I would love to do that. I don't have the book in front of me. I would love to. Oh, I do have the book in front of me. What am I talking about? Thank you for the opportunity.
A manufactory of beetles.
I don't think that's what they're making in the factory. That's more of a side effect.
What if the reason that this guy goes all beetly is because Perrin is having to flex his Taviran to make it work?
I think it's a balance thing.
Yeah, that just occurred to me for the first time right now, but like... Yeah.
Because there's a lot of Taviran going on in this episode.
We're gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. At least 3 cases to Viren, maybe 4. A Manufactory. The midday Amadisian sun was warm over Perrin's head as he rode stair towards the roof of Almazar beneath high, scudding white clouds, 100 miles southwest of Amador. Impatient, he kept the bay at a trot. Farms stretched as far as he could see in any direction on both sides of the road, thatched roof stone houses, with gray smoke rising from the chimneys and chickens scratching in front of the barns. Fat-tailed sheep and spotted black cattle grazed in stone-walled pastures, and men and boys were plowing in fields, or sowing those already plowed. It seemed to be a laundry day. He could see large kettles sitting over fires, behind houses, women and girls hanging shirts and blouses, bed linens on long lines to dry. There was little of wildness, only scattered thickets, and most of those neatly copiched to provide firewood.
Coppiced.
He reached out with his mind to find wolves and found nothing. Unsurprising. Wolves stayed cleared of this many people, this much tameness. The breeze stiffened and he gathered his cloak around him. Despite the need to make a show, it was plain brown wool. The only silk cloak he had was lined with fur and too hot for the day. His green silk coat worked in silver would have to do. That and his cloak pin, 2 wolves' heads in silver and gold. A gift from Vale. It had always seemed too ornate to wear, but he had dug it out of the bottom of a chest that morning. A little something to make up for the plain cloak.
I think that's great. Yeah.
Now edit that and make it sound good.
She always does.
Easily.
That was way better than I usually do.
That was a great read.
Fantastic. So, no wolves, which I thought was interesting because they are pretty much in the wilderness. But the Shanshan are dominating enough of a civilization that they're just driving the wolves away.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Thoroughly settled English countryside where, all the wildness is gone. Like, there's agrarian stuff. There's plants, but there's no, wilderness.
Oh, okay. So it's just heavily farmland, is basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like in the middle of the Willamette Valley, Like, there's no wolves just, cruising around Salem. Well, there might be, but,
But yeah, don't the wolves and, the Tuathan, they kind of get along, right? Because there's a bunch of Tuathan hanging around at this area, too.
No, wolves are scary, right? The Tuatha are here because the Shanshan dispense justice evenly in a way that no other nation does. So the Tuatha are like, safety.
Mastiffs and the wolves do not get along.
That's right. What am I thinking? See, that's why I'm here, because I'm dumb.
It's just Perrin. It's like, because you think Perrin of Perrin as a wolf, and he gets along with Tinkers, and also, Elias honors the Tinkers, right?
But that's because they're men, and they understand things that wolves don't, because, for all that they're wolf brothers, they're still men.
My co-host James would be mad at you if he heard you say Tinkers, because he knows that they prefer to be called Tuathan. So on our podcast, we never say that other T word.
I love the cultural sensitivity.
Listen, I believe in the way of the leaf, and that gives me permission to say Tinker. Okay.
This permission guy over here. Come on.
That's good.
So, speaking of Tinkers, we've got someone who doesn't believe in the way of the leaf, Aram, right? And Perrin sort of thinks he should have brought him to expose him to his own people. And how do you think that would be effective? Do you think it could, or would it just be an absolute horror show as they rejected him over and over and over again?
Yep, that option.
I think so too. I think he was just thinking, kind of like I think sometimes when I'm out somewhere and I see something that my daughter would like, I'm like, oh, if Charlotte was here, she'd be into this. I think that's kind of as far as Perrin was thinking. That's as far as he can go with Aram. Because, if he brought Aram, it would be a disaster. I don't think that he would be getting along with these other guys.
Perrin thinks that they'll just get along. And they would all run away in horror and turn their backs in an act of deliberate shunning. The only way that this would work is if Aram was, begging to go home. And Perrin was like, well, what if I just find any band of Tinkers of Tuathan and make that happen? But Aram doesn't want that. Aram is gleefully delighted to hold on to his sword. The only thing that being turned out of his people again would do is deepen his commitment to becoming one of Massima's people, right? Perrin's lack of ability to follow this chain of reasoning at all is Fail would have been able to turn the situation around before it became such a disaster. And even now, I think she could have probably figured out a way to de-radicalize Aram, but she would not think that exposing him to the Tuatha, just random Tuatha who didn't ask to be like deprogrammers at all. Like, no, come on, no. She would never do that. I like that Perrin is attempting to think of Aram as his responsibility, but it's so little, so late. Like, it's almost like just leaving a tip of like 3 pennies. It's like, it would be less insulting to just leave 0. Like, what are you doing?
I've been left a negative tip before. I have one family that like didn't leave enough to cover their bill. That was even worse than a 3-cent tip. It was a negative tip.
That's rough.
I still remember to this day. It scarred me deeply.
Yeah, assholes, right? Like, pay for your freaking don't go out to eat if you can't afford it, right?
Yeah, and don't take it out on like the service staff. The front-facing staff are always the people who are like, that's where the rubber's meeting the road and souls are being eroded to make capitalism go. Like, you're not hurting the business by being shitty to the person you're directly interacting with. Like, that's not how it works. They've diffused things so that way you're tricked.
That was a strange aside. Sorry about that.
We love our tangents. We have a whole episode dedicated to tangents for every book.
Every book.
Oh, you were saying like, because I was saying that James doesn't want to say that and to offend the Tuathan. It's something else I thought about too, that I've always kind of thought about, and maybe you guys have already addressed this. Speaking of the Tuathan, we don't have them, but we got, I always say Fail. Y'all say Fail. Well, her crew, her Cha Fail crew is here, and they're like the dudes and the ladies who pretend to be Aiel. Is that cultural appropriation that they're doing there, or has that already been discussed with you guys?
We definitely had a discussion about it at one point. And, it's one of those things where they've gotten beaten so many times by the Aiel. They've come over the mountain and gotten beaten in the Aiel War, and then they came back over with Rand and gotten beaten, and then, these people are basically like, what are they doing that keeps kicking our butts? We should probably be doing that too, and so there's a certain level, but it was very much these rich people playing at it, right? Until Fail came along, and then again, here Balwer making them into something that gets trained up a little bit and has some sort of unit cohesion and can be effective as a group.
Oh, it's so cool the way they like blend in with the other soldiers so they can feel those dudes out while Perrin's in with the main guys. So like all levels of intel are covered, like using Cha Fail. So I thought that was kind of cool of them.
Yeah, I remember us talking through the cultural appropriation question, and we looked at just the basic anatomy of it, right? Like, to appropriate a culture implies a power dynamic of a very specific range, which the Kyrian and the Aiel didn't have. Right? They're a bit antagonistic, but they're like 2 neighbor nations. Neither one has enslaved or occupied the other, with the exception of that one invasion that was just to kill that one guy that one time, right? Like, there's not that centuries long like power dynamic kind of thing. And the culture that is being stolen is from the more dominant of the 2. If you were going to say which one of them is the most dominant, the Aiel are the ones who have been inflicting more harm. So for their culture to be appropriated, that's a punch up, right? And if you're punching up, that's not appropriation, right? So like, we had to literally dissect it into those terms to be like, visually it looks like cultural appropriation because of how Robert Jordan coded the characters, right? Because he has the Aiel coded as the amalgamated indigenous noble savage trope of all of that problematicness, because he had them coded that way, and that culture is what's getting stolen by people who are coded as vaguely French Chinese. It looks like cultural appropriation. Like, how can you not see that? But like, if you actually dissect the cultural context that each of those nations is coming from in world, it's absolutely a much messier punching up kind of thing.
I mean, if you think about it, Kyrian just became part of the Aiel Empire headed by the Dragon Reborn.
Yeah.
Right? Like...
Yeah.
Okay, that was such a great dissection of it that I'm converted now. Like you've cured me of thinking that they're cultural appropriating. Thank you.
It's complicated. It was a lot of
really
work to get
is.
through that conversation the first time. I'm glad I could pull it up in such a great little summary right there.
Sure. Make a little clip of that.
Are the Gauls culturally appropriating the Romans when they become part of the Roman Empire and become part of a legion, right? Like,
Ooh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, like...
You're the one that brought up the Roman Empire this time.
Yeah. Damn it, I need
But that's a really, really interesting comparison that I would have to sit with and like actually do a little bit of wiki studying on, because that might be a really, really interesting point to return to in the future, because it is very complicated, and that might be a really good real world analogy. We'll have to marinate on that one.
Mm-hmm. And I think it might even apply more so to the Shan-Chan, because they are acting very much like the Roman Empire, where they come in, they basically let people continue to rule as long as they can follow the basic Roman Empire. Like, they incorporate these people into their world into their empire rather than punishing them, is what I'm trying to say. And a lot of this chapter is kind of like, the Shan-Chan kind of aren't, if you ignore the whole slave thing, if you, other than that, Miss Lincoln, how's the play, right? But if you ignore the whole slave thing, they're actually very good rulers who do treat people very fairly and have honor and respect the dead and respect deals. And like, there's a lot to value in the Shan-Chan Empire culture. I love what Robert Jordan's doing, which is making you go, this is making me super uncomfortable. Like, liking these people is making me really uncomfortable. And I think he's doing that deliberately in this chapter. Yeah.
Sure. I love seeing the gray in people like that. It's wonderful. Yeah. And like, the song, you're right about that. It's like their culture just needs some fine tuning. It needs a little bit of, a manipulation to get it where it should be, because they're almost there, but they got some problems they got to work through.
Right. I mean, Matt uses the promise of a better Shan-Chan to help the former Suldam kind of pull themselves together near the end. That's what powers Lylewyn to be Egwene's warder, is, and all of just like, she goes on her whole redemption arc because like they believe that Shan-Chan is worth redeeming from this mistake. Not that it should all be burned down, but that it is worth improving what we've got to the point that we're not doing human rights abuses on a daily basis. But like, we can have our cultural achievements, our like beautiful novels and like tea ceremonies and sense of honor and like whatever, all of that is like, that doesn't have to go away. You just got to stop doing slavery. America.
Pay your people well, let them have their own lives. That's right.
We get a 3-day time span, right? They've been arguing basically about this plan. Because remember, this is a time jump back, right? Because we know that Fail has started her day on the day she gets rescued, and Perrin is now a couple of days back on that.
Right. Last time we saw Fail, the world rippled and my headcanon was shattered forever. Now we are before that moment.
Right. Because Perrin's going to experience the ripple in his future. Which, again, time sync.
In this 3 days of meetings and stuff, this whole day could have been an email, right? Like their meetings about meetings. That's what I was thinking when I was reading this. Like, you guys could really succinct this up some.
For sure.
And they all ended up going with Perrin's plan anyway. So it's like she tried all these other things. And Perrin, being the stubborn Two Rivers person, I can imagine how these went. Can we try this? No. How about this? No. How about that? No. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, just the montage. No. Very much so. And like, they've clearly built up a good rapport over those 3 days. But it's been, Perrin's had a 3-word vocabulary, which is just one word of that is no.
And then I love this line here. I think your life might make a great story, the general said, her expression inviting him to tell as much as he would. I'd rather my life were ordinary. He told her, stories were no place for a man who wanted peace. And it's like, too bad, Perrin, because you're in the wheel of time, right? Like,
I know, right? That fourth wall got real thin
there.
Yeah. They're also in this part talking about the Tuatha in terms of, 2 things that are interesting. They don't have any like them in Shan-Chan, which, makes sense, right? Because Shan-Chan is entirely the cultural child of a subset of Westlands people who were not Tuatha. I do not see their colonies including Tuatha. We might call them Americans in jest, but they are not founded by religious pilgrims seeking the freedom to be peaceful in any way, shape, or form. Like, the Quakers stayed in Europe in this version, so to speak. And the other thing is about their bravery, right? The myth of them being cowards, and then Perrin being like, well, they did risk their lives to save Two Rivers children in Shadow Rising. So I don't think that seems very unbrave to me. And that's, you know, an important piece to remember because we always in the fandom as readers, we always think of them as like just the pacifists. And it's like, remember, pacifism is not just being a butterfly that gets crushed at the slightest whim. Like, sometimes pacifists have done some really incredibly gnarly shit with their pacifism and like come out on top. So like, you know, there is steel under all of that pacifism softness. There is like the kind of iron core that lets Perrin just sit there for 3 days and say no to the entire Shan-Chan Empire.
And I thought we were going to get that in the show a little bit, and then it fizzled.
The arm linking scene really definitely gave me a lot of like, ooh, and then nothing happened. But like, it felt, yeah, way more true to Shadow Rising Tuatha than to Eye of the World Tuatha, and I did like that. I liked that moment because it was like, yeah, that's the kind of energy we're gonna need for Battle of the Two Rivers.
That's why my co-host James is like so admirable of them, is because of that particular scene in the show, because that's all he knows is the show. So to him is like, they deserve a lot of credit, and we shouldn't be calling them, you know, tinkers. We got to call them their right name because they're badass.
Yeah. Well, we'll see where they get to go with that. But I like that there's a reminder of that here. And there's also this passage where Perrin thinks about Niald, and he says it was difficult to remember that had he not earned that black coat, he would still be working on his father's farm and perhaps wondering about marriage to a neighbor girl in a year or two. And as I was reading that, I was just thinking, like, was this RJ like looking around at his fellow soldiers in Vietnam? I'm kind of feeling that.
I felt there was a lot of Vietnam reminiscence in this chapter, and I might be reading into it, but there was a couple of passages where I thought the same thing before, and, you know, we haven't talked about that. So the fact that you bring that up makes me go, okay, maybe there's more in here than I thought, because I caught that in a passage or two unrelated to this one.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm part of like the Richmond, Virginia, like metal community, like, and I always have been. And so now at my age I am, you know, a lot of the people I was in bands with back then are, of course, still in bands like myself. But, you know, you run into people in the scene, particular like, you know, bass players or maybe lead singers. And it's like, if you weren't doing this, if you didn't have this hobby, you know, I'm not sure what else you would have going for you. So I'm really glad you have this hobby, because otherwise I'm not sure you would even come out of your house. So, you know, I kind of saw a little bit of that when I was reading about Niald. Kind of like felt a little bit of that.
Don't call me out like that.
Yeah, like, as a person who rarely leaves their house except to go to their yard.
Yeah, same. I mean, I'm one of those guys too. That's why I do podcasts. Yeah, my co-host James is all like, yeah, we got to do Jordan Con. We got to do WoTCon. And I'm like, we're doing HouseCon. That's what we're doing.
I am doing WoTCon because I like doing one of those a year. And WoTCon has captured my heart. So I will do that once a year. And Seth's off this year because he's getting married.
Yes.
I do expect that to not be an annual
That's right.
excuse.
No. I do hope to return, but this year trying to get time off for both and money and everything, it's just like I couldn't justify it. So, yeah, but I definitely can't recommend WoTCon highly enough.
And I'm sure Jordan Con's lovely.
Yes.
I just only have one of those events in me per year. So,
and I went to Jordan Con many times. You know, it for me, what I love about WoTCon is it's really founded by content creators, and those are the people who you know, I interact with, and it's just, there's a lot of podcasters and YouTubers there.
those are our colleagues.
Who are our colleagues, right? And whereas Jordan Con is much more established by this group of people who were creating Wheel of Time content on the internet in the 90s, who, you know, all of our information is founded on, and I, you know, venerate as just, you know, wonderful people, but they're not necessarily my colleagues in the same way.
Sure,
right?
sure.
And then there's a lot more stuff at JordanCon. JordanCon is trying to be more of a general con. There's much more. There's like Sanderson stuff, and WotCon is definitely focused on Wheel of Time in a way that I really enjoy. So they're their own beast, and I've enjoyed both of them quite a bit, and they feel the same, right? That feeling of I'm at a con with Wheel of Time fans, and I can talk to anybody about Telmanes and Niald, and they'll be like, oh yeah, that guy, like it's a totally different feeling, and it's wonderful. So if you can make it to either one of them, I always highly recommend it. And I have to do that because I'm not going this year. So,
or you can talk about things like the Sean Chan and the good qualities of them. I'm gonna like transition us back.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Please.
God, it was amazing having a straight man on the show. We were so stoked.
Yeah, we were talking about the Sean Chan and how they had their long meetings. I compared them like to emails. But one good thing about the way the Sean Chan work is like they were talking about this coughing guy, this guy that's coughing. Somebody was saying the Sean Chan don't work while they're sick. Wasn't one of the who was it? Was it Mishima, right?
Yeah.
Mishima that was saying like he was like they shouldn't make that guy be working because he's sick, and that's good practices for like any workplace. If you have a cold, don't show up to work, and that's what he was thinking in his head that should be happening to this guy.
Yeah, Sean Chan have a basic concept of how germs work and how workplaces work.
And bureaucracies.
Yeah, well, that too. Oh, Timbercam. We're on Timbercam now.
I'm waving at your dog.
Also, Zool in chat is pointing out that virtual passes to WotCon are a thing. We do actually make quite an effort to have a virtual experience available. All the panels are streamed. There's a bunch of non-panel activities that are managed by virtual people. Like the virtual experience is quite thorough and excellent, and I can vouch for the behind-the-scenes work going into that. So consider that too. It's a house con option.
And I'll definitely want to time shift it a little bit because my biggest problem is I work Saturdays. Friday, Saturdays. So the idea is that's basically when the con happens is Friday, Saturdays. Sunday is usually just, closing ceremonies and a few other little things. So I'll have to time shift it a little bit.
Yeah, and the videos will be available for a while.
Yes.
So you'll be able to watch them at your leisure rather than only live. But also live. Like we're going to do live questions at panels and stuff like that. So consider that also.
Considered.
Zool runs the Discord in question.
I'm definitely considering Watt Idol.
Yes.
I'm waiting for that suck. I've already got it. My video's finished. My song is finished. I'm just waiting to hit the button to send it to the guys, and I don't know when it's happening.
Wow. I'm not that far along.
I don't know. I feel like I want to share. I've shared it with my wife. I've shared it with James and Corwin, my co-hosts. Am I able to share it with you guys as long as y'all don't like?
Nah, that's starting to break containment. Gotta keep that under wraps.
Okay, all right. Keep it under. We're here. We're keeping it honest on mic, so I'm not going to share it with anybody else except for my wife and my co-host.
People within the fandom. That's breaking containment. But people outside of that, that's different because who are they going to tell?
Okay.
I still want to see it.
Just get those Watt Up guys to get on their ball and start doing it.
I don't even know when the date is, and all I have is my idea and my lyrics. I have the lyrics. I just haven't gotten confident at singing the new lyrics as opposed to the old lyrics, like the original ones. So steps must be taken still. Anyway.
Coughing guy.
Book.
There's a dude coughing a lot.
So there's a time sync with Matt. We can talk about that before we get to the coughing guy. Right. So Perrin gets the swirl of colors, right? Because he thinks about Matt briefly, right? Matt would be right home with his lot, he thought, watching them laugh over a good toss and groan over bad. Those colors spun in his head, and for an instant he glimpsed Matt riding off a road into forest, followed by a line of mounted folk and pack horses.
Yes, that doesn't happen for a while. That's a ways in the future still. For us, reading.
For us, right? So there's this idea that, okay, so again, this is when Matt gets off the horse and he's left Tuon behind.
When he leaves
Or was it when they leave the circus?
I assumed this was when they leave the circus.
Okay. So then that does happen basically at the end of the last chapter we read with him.
Oh, shit.
But I'm getting the gist that it's about to happen, or he's in the midst of it getting ready to happen to him.
No, you're right. Matt riding off a road into forest, followed by a line of mountain folk and pack horses. You know, you're right. This is the last time we saw Matt, was him deciding to bounce out of the circus. This is literally what just happened. I am such a ding dong.
Hey, it's why we do the podcast.
So true.
Yeah, we all have these ideas in our heads that we read through and we form. Because again, there's so many details, you can never remember them all the first time through. And so you come up with assumptions and you operate with those assumptions until someone goes, actually, did you read that closely? And you go, there's a line here. Elise had said Fail was under her protection. We know that's Galena, and no, she's a lying snake. But Perrin's making this assumption that like he's helped protect Fail by making this deal with an Aes Sedai.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's silly, but yeah. Oh, and I noticed the flyers. So first of all, Perrin thinks that the flyers, that the Rockin look like they must eat terrible, scary things, and we know that they're fruitarians. They're basically giant bats, so they just eat fruit. But he thinks they must rend flesh, and that's very silly. But also the flyers, he notices that the flyers are all very like they're horse jockeys, right? They're small, tiny people, very lightweight, and they're rejecting all offers of alcohol. And he's like, that's odd. Most soldiers like alcohol. And I'm thinking, well, not if you're on call to fly an airplane.
Right.
You don't drink.
That makes sense. Yeah, I thought just because they were soldiers on duty, but it makes even more sense.
Yeah, their duty is being on call to fly Rockin', I think.
Okay.
So
Heavy machinery.
Something about having your inner ear functioning up in the sky, I think really is important, right? Like, yeah.
Do they have gum in their culture? They need some gum to chew on while they're up there.
Seriously.
No one ever mentions like a gum substance.
They got that mint. They can make some mint gum. We would hate it, Aradia, but some people would like it. Matt would like it.
Yeah, I mean, tree sap is chewable and has been for a very long time. So presumably people who need it figure out which trees to gnaw on, like beavers.
If they had gum and Perrin was into it, he'd be like an open mouth, like sloppy gum chewer. I bet.
My God,
I bet he would
such
be.
a wolf. That sounds really accurate. Wolves do not chew with their mouths closed. So yeah. So it's been 51 days. We know it has been 51 days. And now he is walking into this building like, I don't want it to be more days. I have 51 days to deal with. And they go in and they do their little thing. And this guy is coughing. And Mishima's like, where is Osha? And then, and then a bubble of evil occurs. And this man does one of the most horrifying sequences I've ever read. I mean, like,
Catch you off guard.
There's vomiting and there's insects and there is existential dread because death. Like, I saw The Mummy at far too young of an age and had very vivid nightmares that stuck in my head way more vividly than the movie actually did.
Okay.
And I just, this is one of the most horrifying passages I've ever read. Just like, I love it now because I'm used to it, but it's just, when I first read it, I mean, I was like, I think I had to sit down and be like, the fuck am I listening to right now? Or reading. I think I was reading this book, actually. This is Knife of Dreams. So I was reading this physically. But yeah, it was a moment.
And this scene definitely inspired the Beetle tent scene in Sanderson's later books.
Oh, yeah, with the cockroaches. Yeah, definitely. Which makes sense. I mean, the Dark One, the Devil, the Oogie Boogie Man, insects and creepy Nazgul. The insect and creepy crawlies are kind of a thing that you repeatedly associate. So, like, it's fine to recycle the concept more or less. He even says, Mishima or someone in here says, like, oh, I heard a rumor that this happened elsewhere with centipedes. Like, this is happening repeatedly. But yes, this is definitely Brandon Sanderson was like, I want to write a bug explosion scene.
This is a cool idea. I want to expand on this. I like it.
Apparently there's an alternate version Spider-Man that's just a collection of sentient spiders that comes together in a human form.
Yep.
So that's Spider-Man.
That's awful.
No.
Well, our like cockroach man here, he throws up so many cockroaches, like his body completely like deflates. And it's funny that we just read this chapter because the 3 body problem just showed up on Netflix.
Yeah.
And there's some identical stuff happening there, like with deflated bodies. And so I got that visual from Three Body Problem. Then I read this chapter like maybe 2 days later, and I was like, wow, that's really neat that those two things happened. Like for me, like so close together. In reality, it was 25 years apart.
But no, yeah, you're right. I finished Three Body Problem this last weekend, and yeah, the deflating scene, which is not a spoiler because it's in the trailer. So if you've even seen the trailer, you know what we're talking about.
Right. So this soldier that threw up the roaches and stuff, they could just like roll him up and like, you know, just reinflate him, just like in the Three Body Problem.
He didn't evolve for this though.
What you do is you sweep up all the beetles, stuff them and sew up his holes and stuff the beetles back in the sack that you make out of his body. And then with Sidene, he can heal him. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You recycle and refurbish those beetles is what you do. Yes.
Well, I mean, those beetles are apparently made of the exact material of all his internal organs and bones and blood and everything. Right. So you could, divide it out and reconstitute him, presumably. That totally is how beetles work. Oh my God. So on Wheel Takes, they did this chapter recently, and Gus spent like 10 minutes trying to do math to figure out how many beetles this was.
That's fun.
Beetle math.
He
assumed the man was a cylinder and like all this, stuff because he's a nerd. And it worked out to like, it was in the millions.
Yeah.
I forget what the number was, but he looked up like some average random beetle and like assumed a cylinder of a Shanchan, a cylindrical Shanchan.
Well, I see. Just do it by weight, right? Like, just be like, okay, a person weighs this much, a beetle weighs that much, divide.
Oh, okay, do that.
Okay.
I want you to find that out. Right. I want us to do our own beetle math.
I actually do have the boar beetle Wikipedia page pulled up already.
Of course you do.
But I don't think it has weight on here.
This guy in Hadnan Kadir could hang out his skin suits. Oh, and that guy that got skinned in the dream that Perrin got the blood splashed on his face in one of the earliest dream sequences. We've got multiple skinned people. But yeah, figure out beetle mass and then figure out the average Shanchan man weight.
I mean, and they're kind of smaller. They describe them. And I'm kind of smaller. I'm like 5'6". And when I'm at like my best peak condition, I'm like 135, 140. I don't know if you want to use me as an example or not, but I'm a small guy. So
sure. Well, assume one Steve as Shanchan clerk.
Why can I not? They give me the size in terms of inches, but nobody maybe that's why he did volume, because he couldn't find the weight of them.
Are you looking at mass of a beetle? Maybe that's the key word.
That's maybe more than weight. Yeah.
I think it's important to know approximately how many beetles this man became.
Yeah, you need to like get back with that other podcast and let them know what your findings were.
I have an entire Discord. Their Discord is very active. So I have a whole Discord to report to.
Yes. Doing the Lord's work here. Doing the light's work. I'm sorry.
God, did you listen to their April Fool's episode?
What?
The Lights Work podcast?
Oh, no. I was just saying in general. I don't know this podcast. No.
Oh, yeah. There's a podcast called The Lights Work. And so now every time I hear that phrase that they stole from the books, I assume it's a reference to their podcast. They were very clever in their branding. And they did a April Fool's episode that was called The Dark's Work. And it was very funny. It was a roast of their normal stuff and like themselves. And it was really, really funny.
I did nothing for April Fool's this year. In years past, I've had the same boss for like 20 some years. And Seth's still looking up stuff, so I can vamp. I've done like some of the stuff I've done in the past is like I've taken like Little Debbie brownies and like smushed them up so they look like turds, leave them on his desk. 1 year, I know his passwords. So like 1 year I went into his computer and like made all his icons into like a crucifix. He's a Christian, so he loved it. And then another year, I put in my 2 weeks notice on April Fool's Day.
I have never enjoyed April Fool's, but that's because I am gullible as fuck, and so I get taken in by everything and take everything seriously. So it's always been a bad day for me. I just hide.
It's not even really a thing in my life. It never has been, but it's just because I work for this guy. He's my supervisor. But because we get along so well, I'm like, if I pulled a prank, who could I prank? Luther. Obviously Luther.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, when you have rapport with a person, that can be fun. But like,
yes,
it's such a weird holiday, and so many people take weirdly malicious delight in like actually scaring people, which is like, you didn't have to. Like, they just got gray hair because of that. You didn't have to do that.
Reddit was very tame this year for 2024 because, like, in 2022 and 2023, there was a lot of really oddball Reddit April Fool stuff happening. This past year, I didn't see a whole lot. I don't know if that was just my subreddits, but I didn't see a lot going on.
The world's too crazy.
The whole world's a fool. We don't need to do this in one day.
Like literal things that are actually happening seem like April Fool's jokes every day. So like, what are you going to do to top that?
Donald Trump selling Bibles.
I know. Right?
April Fools. Right. I wish that was an April Fool's joke.
Oh my God. I know.
Seth, you got any results over there?
It's rough. I'm gonna go with a very small beetle would be about 1 gram, right? Just sort of as a rough estimate. Like that's a little heavy maybe for what these beetles are, but there's a lot of beetles that are they're big,
Easy math.
Yeah. Let's see, how many grams? Let's say 200-pound person, just for simple math. How many grams is in 200 pounds? And by simple math, I mean I'm going to let the internet do it.
Yeah, where you have to give it simple numbers, otherwise it breaks. Historically known internet.
You're looking at like 90,000.
That's it?
That's what I'm saying. I think
Holy
the
cow.
volume is the wrong way to do it because, like, well, and the gram might be really, if we're talking like, what if these are 0.1 grams? Then you're talking 9 million. Right, like,
Yeah, it's really all about the
it's all about the weight, all about the weight. So, if these are very, very small, you could have millions of them. If they're bigger, you're talking still 90,000 beetles pouring out of a man's mouth. Right, like that's enough. Right,
That's
like
enough.
Yeah.
I think 1 gram is good because I'm thinking like a little gram, little nug, and putting that on a scale. It's about the same as a beetle. I think that's a very good approximation.
A penny is 2.5 grams, and I feel like a penny is a little heavy for a beetle.
Yeah.
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 So
it is.
But then if you go to like 1/10 of a penny, that feels like super light, right? So
Well, it's like a ladybug, which are beetles.
Yeah. So I mean, anywhere from 1 to 10 million, I would say is a good estimate of the number of beetles.
1 to 10 million. That's
Yeah.
good.
I like 100,000. You said 90,000. I'm going to go with 100,000.
100,000. Okay.
It's a lot.
And so Chafail, the Chafail group saw this happen, and they were kind of freaked out about it. And like Perrin kind of like reasoned with them and kind of talked their fears down. And I really liked this. I liked the Chafail in this chapter because they start doing this thing where they're like joking with each other, like who's going to rescue Fail the hardest or something. And they start like, just being goofballs and just having fun in spite of what happened or because of what happened, because they're just trying to change that mood because they had a heightened mood. And when you have a heightened mood, you can't just go back down to zero. So instead of, sticking with the fear, they stuck with the funny. And I don't know. I imagine them just being a bunch of goofballs having fun.
I mean, can you imagine you're like hanging out with these flyers and like learning about their job, flying these giant bat things, and everything's fine. You're playing a little dice. And then you start to hear screaming. And then the door bursts open. And a flood of beetles comes crawling out, just like pouring out of the door and like pooling out across the ground and like scattering in all directions. Like,
that's the dark one.
Even imagine?
I've been there, dude. I've been there in the water utility, in the ground, the pump stations.
I don't like
it has happened, and it's awful. It's not good, especially when they're coming out of a person. Like that's even worse.
Yeah.
Just the
Virginia's got bugs, that's for sure.
Yeah, just the bugs themselves are disgusting, but knowing where they came from, and this guy might have been your friend. I mean, it's terrible stuff.
Can you imagine your coworker suddenly does that, just like at the other desk, just like
exactly.
And then Perrin just steps on them and is like, sweep them away. I don't care. And it's like...
Well, and this reinforces the part of Perrin that's like, later on, he's sort of like, I was driven, I was blinded, all I wanted to do, I was ignoring everything around me, and everyone else sees someone who's like, listen, this is irrelevant, right? Whether or not there are beetles erupting from somebody, there's nothing we can do about it. The Aes Sedai know about it. They say there's nothing we can do. Let's continue on to our goal because, if we stop trying because the Dark One's making us randomly die, we'll never get anywhere. The best we can do. But I do like Aradia's point that, like, There's a lot of Taviran stuff going on, especially later on in this chapter, and maybe like Perrin gets a little Taviran boost because of this little like bubble of evil thinning of the pattern Taviran effect. That there's a balance going on in the local area.
It seems like you get a little column A, a little column B, right? Like the equation had to balance, and like maybe Perrin really needed this map, so a bubble of evil had to happen, or maybe the bubble of evil was going to happen anyway, so he got the map.
Right.
Like, I don't know. It's like a plate tectonics thing. Is it a push or a pull? Like, who can say? But like, the balance seems apparent. Either way.
Apparent.
Yeah,
that's.
It does seem apparent.
Parents being like as a parent, parent with a T at the end, parent is being like a good parent here too, like dispensing that practical advice. I think it's the best advice to be given at this point. And I've found myself giving kind of the same advice to my kids when I was a scout leader. I've helped my daughter through like competitive roller skating. There's been all kinds of ups and downs, and the practical approach is always the best. An emotional approach is usually just brings more emotions and, heightened sensitivity, whereas just being practical and just straightforward, I think it's the way to go. Good job, parent, at being a parent.
And also to the guy who runs this station, right? Part of how he restores order to the rest of the clerks is to say, we need to bury this guy. However he died in service. So like, we know what to do when one of us falls in service. We have rituals for that. Whatever the fuck just happened.
He gets workman's comp for this. He was on the job.
Right.
Here's my question. Do you bury the beetles in with the skin, or do you put those separately, right? Do you count that as like...
I'm assuming the beetles are hightailing it out of Dodge, so you'll have a hard time putting them in the grave.
I guess
I would think they need to be in the grave, though. They need to be all together, like that Spider-Man thing you were talking about. It needs to all come together.
I mean, how else do you lay them out properly? That's what that means, right? You gather all the beetles and you lay them out one by one on a pinboard.
You got like really good sentient soldiers here. So just order all the soldiers. Everybody kill all these beetles. Get all these beetles, everyone. I don't want to see one get away.
I know soldiers have done more tedious, boring tasks.
I'm thinking about the Aiel punishments, like for Avienda. Yeah,
Kill
it's like the same thing.
And assign it to a position in the body. It's dark. So they return to the negotiations also and kind of bargain for some rockin'. Do the rockin' ever come into play with the rescue at Malden?
Not that I remember.
Because, like, you, Steve, said that Tylee was just replenishing her stuff. And, like, it sure seems like, given how little this seems to matter to Perrin's success.
It does seem like she said, I need to go on a supply run. Like, you can come with me and get what you need.
I'm going to the store. Do you need anything?
Yeah, that's really, yeah. And he's like, I'll take some milk and 4,000 pounds of forkroot, or however many it is.
Yeah.
4,873 pounds, 9 ounces, which is a lot of beetles.
That is a lot. And Perrin has to display his paper that he stole from Massima here. Just, I guess, normal, like, show your papers. This is where he gets the map, which is all very fortuitous. He also demands carts, not wagons, for the delivery.
Because they can't fit through the gateway.
Yep, they can't fit through the gateways. Because the people he has with them can't make a gateway big enough for a wagon.
Perrin's also thinking to himself, if I can't reason with these people, I'm stealing the shit. Like, he has that thought, like, I'm going to have to steal this stuff if I have to.
Yeah, he doesn't think that about the rockin', but he very much is like, I will steal this whole ass warehouse of forkroot if I have to.
Yeah, I love this. I have the very thing you want. By accident it was, with the Amdician maps I was issued. I'd forgotten I had the thing until you mentioned it. Uncommon luck for you, I'd say. And Perrin, Taviran? Nah. Could it be Taviran work? No, that was impossible. Like, best map you could ever find, perfect for your purposes.
Yeah. Yep. And it was random that it showed up there. And yeah, another Taviran deal that Perrin doesn't even realize is that when he talked about Suroth, he didn't use her titles. So that clued in the this, what do you call them, honorable to the third degree. So she assumed that Perrin was buddies with with Suroth. So that was just an unconscious Ta'Veren thing he did right there, I think.
Right. That's when they escalate, right? Because the first obstacle isn't too hard, right? That's just sort of a lower functionary. That's the guy who's gotten the carts, right? And the Torokan. Yeah. But then they go to this higher tier functionary, this like third tier, what do they call it? A lesser hand of the third rank. So basically she has a duty to distribute this forkroot and can protect that duty and has the rank. And so only by using Suroth's name and basically being like, hey, she's my buddy.
That title lesser, too, is very deceptive because she's not lesser. Like, she's pretty damn high up, right?
Yeah, they describe it as like, if you get to the top rank, then you become the lowest rank person who actually is a hand to the Empress. It's like...
Okay, yeah.
Right, it's such an MLM. Like, it's a very Byzantine MLM.
Empress, hand to the Empress, lesser hand of the Empress, and she's the third rank of that, right? So there's like...
Because, each hand has several people, at that rank.
Fingers.
Sure, yeah.
Band of the hand.
But it is very much like you think that the challenge of the chapter is going to be the Beatles. At first, like, oh, that's the climax. And then it's like, no, we got to go to this whole ass other warehouse and deal with this whole ass other official. And you're like, shit, is there going to be a bubble of evil here too? Like, what's going on? And instead, we just get the little Ta'Veren twist of Perrin forgetting how Shan culture works and saying just the right thing.
Luckily.
Oh, I had a question here. She's talking about the order in which she's going after things, that they're going after the forkroot, and then after the Adom. Why is she going after the Adom?
Because of all the wise ones.
Oh, she's not going after one Adom. She's going after... She needs like a cache of Adom so that she can... Got it. Because she's going to collar them all because they're all going to be drugged up on forkroot. So it's going to be like shooting fish in a barrel.
How many... they know approximately how many people they're going to be able to collar. So she's like, I need... the ability to drug them and the ability to contain them while they're drugged. So that way I can do my Shan thing.
Do y'all think Tali was really into this whole transaction? Like watching this lesser have to subdue to Perrin and give up her stuff? I kind of got the impression that Tali got like a real kick out of that, but couldn't really express it.
Oh, yeah. Anyone who's like in the military out there in the field dealing with functionaries to get the supplies they need to survive and fight the war, of course it's got to be super satisfying when they like put a bunch of paperwork in front of you and you go, stamp, I have the president's approval to take whatever I want. Don't even just give it to me. This is supersedes everything, and that's got to be incredibly satisfying. I daydream of walking into the DMV and being like, excuse me, give me my fucking license. Who are you? It doesn't matter. Just give it to me. I don't have to prove anything. I'm not going to fill anything out.
I kind of don't want that to happen to you, Seth. I'm sorry.
But no, it's a different level to move out.
Yeah.
There's a bit about the Horn of Valir here that seems mildly interesting. They see some hunters for the horn and casually mention that the Horn of Valir is really important to Shan prophecy, and Perrin very carefully is like, interesting, and does not volunteer any of the information he has about it. Just reminding us that that's gonna come up, and also fun, not quite foreshadowing, but it's just funny that like he thinks, oh, well, am I tied up in the horn somehow? And it's like, well, you are going to lose your wife a second time on behalf of the horn. That is going to happen. So you are kind of tied up in the horn a little bit.
He does say, I've heard it's been found. And it's like, yeah, you heard it was found from the person who found it and blew it.
Yeah, you were there. You heard it getting found. Right. Like, you heard it getting sounded.
You fought in the battle for, side by side with the heroes of the horn. Right? Because wasn't Perrin in the fight with the heroes of the horn in that first? Yeah, he was there. Yeah. And then right after that, Perrin gets spotted by the Dark Friends who later shoot him with an arrow, right?
Is that what that is?
Yeah,
That little
the
eye
quick jerk of the
pants?
woman's head, her mouth falling open, she stared. The man who froze gaped at him. One fellow actually tripped over his own boots and stumbled to his knees. That one stared, then scrambled to his feet and ran, pushing people from his path as though fearful Perrin might pursue him. Because he's a dark friend going to get help to shoot Perrin.
Wow. Okay. I didn't catch that.
I didn't catch that either. I just thought it was there for Perrin to make wry comments about men and yellow eyes. Da 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 da.
Exactly.
Oh, you're so right, Seth. You're
Right.
so right.
Because we've been seeing that happen with Matt, right? Matt went gambling, someone spotted him and took off running, and then there was a bunch of people trying to kill Matt, right? That was a dark friend.
Oh my God.
Same
I'm
thing
such a
happened in the
ding-dong.
last chapter, happens here. They spot Perrin, run off to get him, and then a few hours later, minutes later, however long it is, he gets shot by some snipers who are willing to kill themselves, so they must be dark friends.
Yeah.
Right, because that man runs off. They go into the manufactory, have the whole forkroot exchange. They come out of the exchange and they're talking about it, and that's why he turns and avoids the arrows, because of the conversation they're having in the aftermath. So they have the entire time he's in there to get in position
get ready.
and yeah, they know where he is. They know where he's
Yeah.
going to come out. So they're just up there waiting. And that's why,
Yeah,
again,
hell yeah.
again, the Beatles had to happen because Perrin needed the Taviran to save his life.
Like a life for a life, right? Perrin dodged the arrow with Taviran-ness, and to balance that, someone had to die.
A life for a life. That clerk died so that Perrin could live.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a horse got shot, but they don't count the same.
I got two questions here, and one of them is like, yeah, Seth, you like were paying attention. Well, I guess me and Aradia were focusing on the yellow eyes, because that's what my first question is. Because Perrin is talking to them, and he says that he knows somebody else who has yellow eyes, and that's when Tylee and Mishima like exchange this glance with each other, and I didn't really quite understand that. And since I've written that question, I've kind of thought about it since then. And I wonder if they're looking at each other. I think Aradia might do the answer, because they're thinking, well, maybe Perrin is not the guy. Maybe this other guy he's talking about is the Wolf King. Or was there another reason that they exchanged a glance there?
I hadn't even thought of it that hard. I think they were just being like, man, this guy is really clueless about how special he is.
Yeah. But yeah, I think there is that whole, like, they think that he's the Wolf King. We never really get the Sean Chan prophecies about the Wolf King. We get that little bit about, like,
When the Wolf King carries the hammer, then the final battle is...
When the fox marries the raven.
Yeah, that's the
yeah.
one. That's the one. But there's got to be a lot more than that, right? And so I assume, including in that, there's maybe, the Wolf King and his yellow-eyed companion or something like that. Like there could, maybe there's some reference to Elias in the prophecies. And so this idea that there's a second yellow-eyed man confirms even more that he is the Wolf King.
Well, also there's Gnome. I mean, maybe it's just like one of those, and then men will start getting yellow eyes. It won't be just one. It will be several. And they're like, oh shit, the several is coming on.
And maybe that's
know.
where they very much could be like on the lookout for the Wolf King, and think it's not him because he's not chosen the hammer yet.
Okay.
But he is very, very wolfy. I mean,
Yes.
come on.
Yeah. Wolfman. My second one was exactly tied in with this. Because, yeah, Perrin twists in his saddle to look over, I think at Tylee or something. And, of course, it's Taviran. But the reason that he turns around and twists is all she asks, did your lady bring powerful connections or land? And then it's Perrin is stunned by that question and turns to stare at her. Why would that question stun Perrin other than just to, service the the plot?
I was wondering that too, why it was so surprising.
We don't talk about money.
That's not Perrin's
You don't ask
attitude.
somebody if they're... I mean, I really do think it's just his Two Rivers sensibilities. It's his absolute that's so rude, right? I really do think it's a little bit of
never
Perrin
allowed
clutching
to
his
declare.
pearls. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Sure, I could
Okay, I
see
guess
that
that makes
if he's
sense.
have I not convinced you that I married my wife for herself and not for her resources? I could see that. Like, come on.
Okay.
Yeah, and also like he's marrying her because he loves her. He doesn't give a shit about her lands, right? Like they might also be surprised because he knows she does have a lot of land, right? Like that's not why he's marrying her, but like
That she does have potentially all of Saldaia.
Right. But Perrin never thought about her that way, right? He's like he almost didn't marry her because of that reason.
I guess it's Tylee's asking, like, why are you going through so much effort for your wife? Who do you owe? What do you have to lose? And Perrin's like, my wife. That's what I have to lose.
Right.
Why does it have to be more complicated?
Okay. Yeah, not like an arranged marriage, but it's just some random person. It's like somebody he really, really digs.
Right. And Tylee's not used to rich, powerful people having that sort of relationship.
No.
Even though Perrin's not really rich or powerful, he just seems like it.
Okay.
Yeah, he is.
Is he rich?
At this point, yes.
That's true.
Sure.
He would just never spend any of it.
Yeah, he is still like coupon clipping mindset. I'll make it myself.
And Tylee's just being like, why are you going through all this effort to rescue her? What about it is so important? Like most nobles would give up and just marry somebody else who has more powerful lands, right? Like, why are you thinking about attacking? That's sort of my take on it. And he's gonna be like, what do you mean? I'm shocked you would even mention that. I love her.
And that little head gesture.
Yeah, that little what?
Is just enough to spare him getting skewered right in the aorta.
Yeah.
And 2 arrows go for him. I don't know if I'd ever quite noticed. I knew there were 2 people that died, but I don't know. I only noticed the 1 arrow or something because I'm silly.
Well, doesn't the second arrow go through a horse?
Yeah, it goes into a horse.
Yeah.
So he only gets hit with 1, but there were 2 arrows fired at him, and they both would have hit him if he hadn't twisted. So 1 missed him entirely, and the other hit him not in the intended spot.
Both the dudes both those guys shot at the same time. Like, I got him from the left, you get him from the right. We can definitely get this guy. And then he like did a little sneaky skinny thing and got away from it.
And then they poison pilled themselves rather than have to report failure. They took poison and threw themselves off a roof to make very sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Very James Bond. Hell yeah.
I'm always like, well, but what if you fell off the roof and broke your spine in such a way that like you couldn't digest the poison and so you didn't die, but you were paralyzed and they were able to question you? Like, just take the poison. I don't think you need to do both.
They want it to work quickly. Maybe the poison takes like 10 minutes. I don't know.
Yeah, the drop was for the drama. I like that.
just for the drama.
I mean, if you're going out, might as well do a flip, right? Like,
I've always wanted to free fall for 10
Cannonball.
feet.
Oh yeah, they mentioned like that is just this act impresses Tylee too, because she's like, wow, Perrin's got some pretty powerful enemies. This is pretty dope.
I also really like how Perrin responds to Tylee in the immediate aftermath of this, because Tylee says, oh, my eyes are lowered, that this would happen to you, like on my watch. Perrin, knowing nothing about what eyes being raised or lowered means in Shan-Shan culture, correctly picks up on the subtext and is like, no, your eyes are not lowered. I'm fine. I take responsibility for my own safety. It's cool. And I like that he's normally so clueless. And yet this one time, he shows a glimmer of social intelligence and is like, I'm picking up what you're putting down, and no, you're not at fault.
Intuitive. That's cool.
Every now and then. And then he says, all right, I want to get 1 power healed once I don't have an audience. That would be great.
Yeah.
And Tylee, we get to learn from Tylee that the Shan-Shan do not use healing.
no.
They categorically do not use 1 power healing. Their entire empire, all their wars, all their rebellions, all their assassination attempts, not a single one has been augmented by 1 power healing. None of their conflicts have had that. So
They don't know what they're missing out on, baby.
Not at all.
It's good stuff.
Damane are weapons. They're not for healing. They're only for attacking.
the amount of diseases that they are suffering. Shan-Shan is disease riddled. Shan-Shan, like America, is plague riddled because they don't have magic vaccines. But it's I don't know if we had it confirmed before, but this is like a visceral rank and file reaction. Like, we do not get healed. Whereas Perrin is like, I'll barely even need to eat an extra bacon sandwich to recover from this.
Right. It's just a hole in my arm. It's no big deal. Which, by the way, must be just fucking... Can you imagine an arrow going through your arm? How traumatic that would actually be. And the way he's just shrugging it off like it's nothing. I mean, there is some stoicism knowing it can be healed. There's some ability to be like, okay, this doesn't hurt right now because I've got adrenaline and it'll be healed later. So I don't have to have an emotional reaction of losing basically the functionality of my arm.
He even flexes his arm experimentally after they yoink the thing
Yeah.
out. I'm like, sir, I think you're not supposed to do that.
No, please
I
don't.
don't think getting a hole punch through your arm is call for flexing.
He's definitely on adrenaline. And it is a matter of perspective. Like, again, in my water business, if there's like a huge leak somewhere, somebody who's never seen a huge water leak is going to freak out. Oh my God, look at all that water. This is awful. When, you know, we look at it and like, we can repair that in 2 hours. It's no big deal. You know, it just depends on your perspective and your experience. So exactly the same thing here.
Yeah, and as Zool pointed out in chat, remember the arrow in Perrin's leg? Or no, in his rib.
Yeah, it was in his rib where he was like almost died and they had to heal him. He was all delusional.
Because a barb was like caught on his rib and it got infected and like...
He was riding the horse all day without taking care of it like an idiot.
Relatively speaking, this is nothing.
Like a man.
He's like, yeah, I've had far worse arrow wounds. Like this will get fixed up in no time. I think, perspective and knowing that it's about to get fixed like in 5 minutes is like, well, it hurts, but whatever, it's fine.
You know, and he's as one of his unintended consequences, he's sort of he's taking on the forkroot, and this forkroot was being used to find women to collar, right? So there'll be a break from that. It's not really something he was trying to do.
He's giving the local population a break.
He's like, actually, like, I wonder if a certain number of women will be able to escape with this gap in, they're out of tea. I
like that there's some boy or girl in the fourth age who's able to do great things because there wasn't tea on the day that they were going to get tested by the Shanshan during the fall of the third age. You know, and they would have died or been burned out or whatever in training. But like because they slipped through the cracks, they were able to go on to found one of the great libraries or something cool in the fourth age. I wanted to just headcanon that. Speaking of the local people, we've also got the Honorable talking about how they've stripped the countryside bare of forkroot and are now inducing local farmers to make it into a commodity
cash crop.
Right.
And
hell yeah, baby.
By summer, we're going to be able to have a whole bunch. And I don't know that we ever get to summer in the timeline before the last battle happens. But
I don't think so either.
I thought it was interesting that the Shanshan had moved in and so quickly started up on like some seriously destructive environmental damage in the name of agricultural profit. Just thought it was interesting. Robert Jordan just sort of shoehorned that little analogy in there.
See, and now I'm making forkroot and cotton a more close analogy.
Ooh.
That this like stripping, that maybe it's like a high degree of labor and they're stripping out all the native land to grow it, and
or just poppy wars.
Just a cash crop. Yeah, kill soil.
Kill soil
just poppy wars.
quickly.
Like there's a lot of. I mean, it's obviously there's a lot of politics and
agricultural warfare
around plants.
Yeah, and I mean, and Matt and Tom talk about it with the Shanshan too, like when they're coming in with the full-on settlers in their wagons with their weird goats and all their seeds and stuff. It's like, these are going to be harder to remove. And in fairness, this is a native plant. Forkroot is not from Shanshan. Forkroot is native to the Randland continent.
Yeah, the Shadow Coast.
Yeah, but they're very much changing its distribution and how much of it there is and where it's going to get grown. And replacing native ecology with just monocrops, that's not going to go well if the Shanshan get their way. They're just going to monocrop this until they've got all the forkroot they could ever want. Like that, well, that's not great. East Shanshan Tea Company.
And can we talk about 4,800, that's nearly 5,000 pounds of tea.
Like 2.5 tons. Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Of tea. Yeah, of that product. So that's How many
pounds do a cart
fill up? Jesus.
Yeah. All right.
Look that
We're
up,
doing
Seth,
weights
come on.
today. Weights and measures. That's apparently we're gonna have to subtitle this one. Weights and measures.
Yes, that is the episode title. Weights and measures.
How
Yeah,
many?
the legit is saying no. That's how you get cane toads. Yeah.
I'm gonna guess from being a forklift driver that these carts can probably handle no more than 500 to 800 pounds each. No, maybe more, because you could probably fit like 6 people on a cart, I guess.
Sure.
So let's say 1,500 pounds per cart is how much you can get, which actually is quite a bit. That's not that many carts. It's just a couple.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
4.
Yeah, hand carts,
Dang.
250 pounds. Yeah, I am too.
I'm disappointed.
But I mean, it is tea, right? Like, how many? Like, I mean, I guess if you're throwing it off ships in the Boston,
Well,
yeah,
you gotta
that's the
bail it up
thing,
high.
Is
That's
it's density
right.
versus volume. Like, how
Right.
densely packed is this tea? How big are these bales?
I imagine they're quite a bit bigger than just you need more than 4 carts simply because like you can only fit so many bales on the carts.
Yeah, I'm thinking of those big like rolls of like hay that I see in farmers' fields, and they weigh, you can move them with like 3 people. So I guess they're 800 pounds, maybe something like that. So like one of those big bales. Yeah, we're talking about 10 carts, maybe. I like this.
Vuji in chat
don't
said
need to
that someone would need to find a beetle that then lives on the forkroot and start breeding that en masse so we can have biological sabotage.
I'm sure that won't cause any issues, and then we can import cane toads to eat the beetles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we know that cane toads are definitely not a plague that is destroying Australia.
Cylindrical hay bales are 2,000 pounds, according to chat and Zool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a lot of hay.
But again, we said 4,000 pounds, so that's 2 of those.
4,800, almost 5,000. I'm going to round it up to 5, baby.
Regular bales are 60 to 80 pounds, which sounds accurate. I can technically move a bale, but not particularly
you can pick those
easily.
up.
I can do it, but just that's a lot.
The only time I've loaded hay bales into my car is when we did archery and scouts, and we would shoot arrows again. There you go. We would shoot our arrows at bales of hay. It was a lot of fun.
I got to help with picking up hay bales once when I was in middle school, and I was very annoyed that they would.
Got to. Didn't have
Yeah,
to. You got to.
I got to experience just how heavy those things were, and I'm not that much stronger now.
And how itchy your arms get when you move them around a lot.
Hay's pokey. Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah.
Awful.
And I'm already pretty sensitive to grass. Like, I can't just lay on grass. So yeah, the extra abrasiveness of hay was fun.
Aradia cannot touch grass. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I literally cannot go out and touch grass. It bites. I'm allergic to grass.
All these scenes in The Eye of the World and The Great Hunt when they're in grass hay bales sleeping in barns, I'm just like, no, I do not want. I don't like to clear out some space. That sounds awful.
I really liked it when Matt later on is like, I don't remember hay being this itchy. That seems unrealistic that I had to find time in hay bales. This is uncomfortable. I'm like, thank you. Thank you for the realism coming out of the 90s. Appreciate that.
But I think that brings us to the end. Like, right, he's gotten shot. We've talked about the Suldom and the forkroot and everything else.
Yeah. You want to talk about the sign against evil that they make? It's like different than the rock and roll sign. It's like they like put like the
arc.
thumb and forefinger into an arc and then curl the other fingers down, I think. And I don't, that's just a C. I don't understand what
It could be.
These kids and their hand signals. I mean, come on.
Sean Chan gang signs against evil. I don't know.
But yeah, that's pretty much what I envisioned, was them just like doing this, like maybe like against their heart or something like that.
Yeah, because I liked the rock and roll sign. Yeah, here's a peculiar gesture forming an arc with the thumb and forefinger, the others curled tightly. I don't know what else that is other than like an ASLC. Yeah. No, it's not even an ASLC. It's not even that. It's what even is that? What? Anyway, Sean Chan are silly.
Basically, you take your 2 fingers and make the shape of an L on your forehead. And they don't stop coming and they don't stop. All right. Anyway.
Now, Mishima did it for real. He was like doing it for real but Ty Lee did it like
Right.
unconsciously, which I thought was interesting. Like she didn't even realize that she was doing it. She's like, "Don't talk about that crap. It's all nonsense."
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
in case,
exactly. Because
you know?
because the Shanchan are a very superstitious people.
They
like
are.
we see it with Tuon and Selusha, and it trickles
God.
down, right? Like
Tuon,
it's
too much.
how your leaders are will help dictate the culture of what goes on underneath them, and you're seeing it here in the rank and file. You have Tylee being a cynic, but knocking on wood just in case.
And I love my headcanon is that's all sourced in the Doomseer. That basically the royal house is used to having Doomseers, which accurately predict these omens. And then there's a whole system of omens and prophecies and things in the Shanchan culture that are kind of based on what the Doomseers are seeing, but obviously not based in fact, because you're not seeing the pattern. You're just making shit up based on things the Doomseers saw.
Right, they tried to reverse engineer some sort of pattern, but
Exactly.
it's just what Doomseers see. There's no
Right.
pattern.
That's like, sometimes Min knows what she knows what it means, but there's no way, it's not like from the description she knows what it means, right? Like you have to figure out each vision independently.
Right. Yeah, I really prefer that headcanon to them just making shit up completely randomly. I want it to be something that once made sense and had context, and then like enough burnings of the Library of Alexandria happened that like we've only got this weird highlight reel of myths and we're taking it as literal fact or whatever. I like that because otherwise they're just silly. This way it suggests a rich and fragmented history that has lost context.
And I also like the fact that like when Tuon's criticizing Matt's beliefs and he's criticizing hers, that there's some truth in both of them, right?
Exactly. Balance, equality. We both have a piece, neither of us is complete.
That's right. Yep. I got 50 cents. You got 50 cents.
Right.
Together we got
Right,
$1.
yeah. But yeah, that's all that I've got for the chapter. So Steve, if you want to read us out.
Mishima joined them, leading his horse and looking grave. 2 men fell from that roof with bows and quivers, he said quietly. But it wasn't that fall that killed them. They hit the pavement hard, yet there was hardly any blood. I think they took poison when they saw they'd failed to kill you. That doesn't make any sense, Perrin muttered. If men will kill themselves rather than report failure, Tylee said gravely, it means you have a powerful enemy. A powerful enemy? Very likely Masima would like to see him dead, but there was no way Masima's reach could extend this far. Any enemies I have are far away and don't know where I am. Tylee and Mishima agreed that he must know about that, but they looked doubtful. Then again, there were always the Forsaken. Some of them have tried to kill him before. Others had tried to use him. He did not think he was going to bring the Forsaken into the discussion. His arm was throbbing. The cut on his chest, too. Let's find an inn where I can hire a room. 51 knots. How many more? Light. How many more?
Nice.
Well done. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. You were a fantastic guest. It's always nice to have a professional podcaster and musician on for the quality of the volume and the smooth way in which the conversation went. So I really appreciate it. I thought that was great.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm psyched to be here, guys. I've been listening to y'all for so long. Y'all have helped me like more than you know, like in the world of Wheel of Time throughout the years. So I'm grateful to be here, and y'all will still be seeing me around, I hope.
Yeah,
Definitely,
for sure.
definitely.
I'll have to get you back on sometime.
Yeah, and convince you to go to one of these cons one of these days.
Maybe. You can convince James pretty easily, but me, I don't know.
Well, consider virtual WotCon and just see what it's about from the safety of your own home.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Your listeners, consider Sweet Child of Time, my podcast. I host a podcast, Sweet Child of Time. We do TV recaps. We've done 1899, Dark, and Wheel of Time. We've done every episode of all those. Plus, we've done stuff like The Winter Dragon, all the Amazon bonus material, stuff like Time Bandits. Anything having to do with time is what I like to podcast about. And music has a time meter to it, so music is definitely a subject in my podcast as well. So check me out, please, Sweet Child of Time. You're already listening to Wheel of Time Spoilers, which is the best Wheel of Time podcast. Now listen to the worst Wheel of Time podcast, Sweet Child of Time.
It's not all that bad.
And I guarantee we're not all that good.
Well,
Well, you're very kind, repeatedly. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for joining us in chat. I know we
Thank
got
you,
started
everybody.
late, so we had a smaller crowd than usual. But those that were here, you're all troopers.
Yep. Yeah, we had just a little bit of technical problems in the beginning, which is par for the course. Yeah.
Professionals.
I was gonna say.
It is an illusion.
Yes. All right. Well, see you next week, and have a great Wheel of Time week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Sweet. And I always do record a backup here on Zoom, but there's always a little bit of internet distortion in the recording over Zoom, and it's also, you can't pull the tracks apart as easily. Although we do get multi-track recording in Zoom, so
Yeah, you get multi-track, but the quality dips whenever people are talking over each other. So even if you pull them
Right.
apart, you can hear the quality
Right.
dip. And it's like, same thing with StreamYard. When I do TVAD, like, I can pull them apart all I want, but if you know what you're listening to, you can hear that they were talking over each other just because the bitrate drops, like, dramatically.
right. But local recordings, we don't have that problem at all.
And like the other day, I was recording with Hot Nuance, and there's been cat meowing and dog howling that has come through on the local recording, but Zoom has filtered it out. So, you know, Allie will be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, the dog's doing this or that," and we can't hear it.
Yep.
And then I get to the local recording, it's like, "Oh, there is that like little dog howl in the background. That's so cute." And then I leave it in because everyone likes dog noises.
Yeah.
It turns out.
Yeah.
Exactly. I always leave in any cat, any dog, any mention of any animal stays in the podcast. In the last 2 episodes, I've told you I've got my co-host to edit for me. There was a whole interaction with me and Lindsay and her cat and the meowing, and he edited it all out. I was pretty pissed, man.
The hardest part about turning editing over to somebody else is when you go, "That's not how I would do it," and you have to be like, "But I'm not doing the editing," and that's a benefit.
It's tough to do.
Yeah.
Give and take,
The only thing I
baby.
will edit out is barking because it's so like interrupty. But like,
Oh.
you know, if a dog is just
Yeah.
going off, it's like, no, we're not. You're gonna have one bark.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
funny, and that's it. There's a fine art to it.
If my dog Hopper, if he starts barking, forget it, because he's got a really high-pitched, high decibel bark that like hurts his own ears. Like he'll bark and he'll shake his head because his ears hurt from his own barking. He's awful.
That's relatable, though. Sometimes I'm like, why am I so shrill? Why do I have to be at such a high-pitched register? Like, I just want to listen to a tenor, please.
You and Hopper would be buddies then. That's cool.
I'm sure he's the best boy, so.
No, he's not.
He's the worst boy.
Nope. He's the worst boy ever. Yep.
Timber was the best boy. We went to the park yesterday, and he was just really good. And we actually laid out a blanket, and he was off leash with the other off leash dogs, and they were all playing. And he was, you know, we had another dog come over to us, buddy, who was very hesitant to interact with people, but somehow kept coming back over to our group and getting closer and closer each time until he was like in our laps. It was very cute.
Just like I feel like I know you guys, I feel like I know Timber as well because I've heard him so much, his little chain rattling and you talking to him. Like it was just this last episode I was listening to earlier today, which was one from 2019. There was some Timber in there. You could hear him whining in the background.
He should be back any minute now. He's usually he's with Never at her work, because he gets to go to the office and be spoiled by a bunch of people at her office every single day, which I mean I can't really complain about, right? It's best for him.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
He needs the human contact.
Yeah, just constant attention. But I miss him every once in a while. But he'll be back. She drops him off at lunch usually.
So, Steve, were you listening to the Patreon, the rewinds?
No, I just listened to whatever the most recent chapter I read in the book was.
okay.
So I just recently read like chapter 20 of Shadow Rising. So that's what I was
Oh, yeah,
listening
no, you're
to.
right. Because, yeah, what's the rewinds are currently back in 2017, because that's how old this podcast is. You said 2019.
Yeah. Well, I have listened to all those. And like recently, like within this last read that I'm on right now. Because I think that this reread that I'm on currently, I'll be able to sync up with y'all finally. Because I've never been able to. Like when you were introduced to the podcast Aradia, like I was listening at that time, but then like my reading surpassed y'all, and it's just impossible for me to like stop reading what I'm reading and like go back to where y'all are. It's got to be a forward trajectory for me. So I'm always listening to y'all's old episodes for the most part.
Oh, wow. What a trip.
I'm sorry.
So you're the one really helping hold down that backbeat of just constant plays on the old episodes.
Right.
I'm like, who's listening to these constantly? Well, apparently Steve is.
You know, a great thing, this is not going to be good for you guys, is you made a comment on one of the most recent episodes, like currently Aradia. You said that I've been listening, you said as Aradia, I've been listening to some of the older episodes, Seth, and you and Patrick were so wrong about so many things. And I was like, oh no, that means I'm wrong because I was taking their word for it that whole time.
I mean, just like really easy stuff that like...
I had a lot of trouble with Sidene and Sidar when we first started the podcast. I'd mix those up a lot. So way more than made it into the final episodes. You know, there's just stuff like that where I just, I as I said before, I started the podcast not saying I know everything, but hey, I want to learn more about these books that I love, and I want to do that with my friends, and so
right.
You know, I never meant to speak as a place of authority, just as a place of like, hey, this is fun, and I may discover these things, and I have all this headcanon, and a lot of it's probably wrong, but there's all this stuff online that I can reference and stuff like that.
And I mean, that wrongness is why I joined in.
Yeah.
It's like these men need me.
And let's be honest, what's the best way to get attention on the internet? Post something that's wrong, and people will come out of the woodwork to correct you.
To correct you. That's
you
right.
know? So this plays into, I was talking to Allie the other day, and she said often that, you know, she gets a bunch of hate on her podcast for being a woman on the internet. And I was like, you know, I've never gotten much hate on my podcast. Like, we don't get a regular backbeat of men telling me that I'm wrong. And I don't quite know why that is. And she's like, well, it's because you're not wrong on the internet. Like, your whole shtick, like Allie's whole shtick is being wrong.
Right.
My whole shtick is knowing things. It's a fundamentally different dynamic. So I think that might be part of also why the podcast is having not the growth we want. We're too correct. Not enough people are finding us to tell us we're wrong.
Be more wrong. You got me this time, and I can be wrong a lot because I'm sure I'm going to say some wrong stuff.
Well, Steve, let's get an introduction because we've been talking for a while now, and this people hearing your voice probably going, well, who the hell is that?
Yeah, I reached that point right before I found the podcast. I hit this point where I realized I had listened to the books a million times. They had finished. I had moved to college, and they were just like the comfort thing that I was holding on to, which it had already always been my comfort thing. But like, I hit this moment where I was just like, I will never, even if I stopped listening to them, I will never stop having the echoes roll around in my head. I have imprinted too hard on these books. I guess it's time to get a tattoo. And then I got myself a massive leg tattoo. Like my whole right calf is a Wheel of Time tattoo. And I was just like, yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. And I don't know how, but somehow the universe got the memo. And within a couple of months of that tattoo healing, right after the eclipse, I remember it was after the eclipse in 2017, Instagram suddenly showed me a Wheel of Time spoilers post. And I was like, the who now?
Wow.
And like the rest is like, I don't even know how it happened. Instagram just randomly, but like the words Wheel of Time spoilers came across after the tattoo had like healed. Like the tattoo was completely a me thing. It has nothing to do with fandom at all. I have a tiny tattoo for fandom.
I can tell you how that probably happened, right?
Yeah.
So early on in the podcast, what Patrick would do is he'd go on Instagram and search for anyone who had anything Wheel of Time in anywhere in their profile or any posts. Yeah. And he just followed anybody who had anything Wheel of Time related, right? And so you probably got the tattoo, had posted about it, probably said, here's my Wheel of Time tattoo. Patrick saw that post and followed you, which meant up in your follows post Wheel of Time spoilers, which means you go, oh, yeah. So
that must have been.
So the tattoo in a lot of ways did lead you to the podcast, probably almost certainly.
Almost definitely.
I mean, you're right. You're obviously right, but you've just stolen all the magic from her story.
I think that makes it more magical.
I mean, I agree. I agree with Seth.
Because the tattoo is getting the decision to get the tattoo is why she's sitting on this podcast here today.
Oh, wow. Sure.
Yeah, no, to actually know the chain of reasoning actually does make it more magical. Like, because I was like, no, this matters so much to my life. I'll never be the same. So I might as well get the tattoo. Because at first I was like, it's silly to get tattooed for a fantasy thing. Like, I'm really just going to like quote some random guy on my leg. Like, really? And then I had this moment of like, but yeah, I mean, my brain is permanently contoured in a Wheel of Time way now. And to have my little I'm just going to post about it. Like, no, the universe didn't get the memo. The algorithm did.
Yeah.
The algorithm got the memo.
Right.
The universe is the algorithm.
Yeah, but like then, yeah, Patrick's strategy was extremely solid for finding your people.
At that point in time, yes. No more. Does that work, I think, as well? No, it doesn't work
anymore.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, but I mean, yeah.
I did that when I started my podcast, which started my podcast was my way of getting a Wheel of Time tattoo. Because you got a tattoo on your body, it's there forever. I've got I started a podcast, which is going to be out there on the internet forever.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing. I put myself out there, and that's why I'm here as well, because of my podcast. If it wasn't for my podcast, I'd just be another reader that would be listening to y'all's podcast. But then, of course, I like podcasting. I want to reach out. So here I am, too, because of my Wheel of Time tattoo podcast. I should call it that from now on.
Well, and you survived the like ridiculous memory hole that I kept dropping you into for no good reason. Like I just like some people it's a scheduling thing or a technology thing. For some reason you just like were grease in my brain and just like zoop like every time. And eventually
I mean, it's I'm forgettable. I'm a forgettable dude. I can admit
not
it.
at all. Not at all.
No. Like not at all. And it was just me. It was just my brain thing. You just got lost in between the couch cushions of my brain. But I'm really glad you persevered.
I can't imagine what could cause that, Aradia.
Yeah, I don't know what could possibly cause that. I am a professional podcast producer, okay?
You've recently vacuumed under the couch and you've pulled me out, and here I am now.
Yeah, no, and we're super happy to have you on.
Yeah, really glad you could make it.
And the great chapter for this, too, because, you know, it's easy to say, like, you know, who's your favorite Wheel of Time character? A lot of people love Matt because he's really lovable and easy to, like, be a favorite.
He's funny.
Yeah. And his chapters are kind of easier to read because they're kind of easier on the brain for me. But my favorite chapter is my first time through. My favorite characters, there's two of them that I just can't figure out who I like better, is Nynaeve and Perrin. So I asked if I could be on either a Perrin or a Nynaeve episode. So Perrin it is. And you know I got a dog named Hopper.
Yeah.
So of course, you know, obviously I'm a Perrin guy. And I had to like what do you call it? Retrofit that name, because when we got Hopper, Stranger Things was big, and my wife and my daughter were like, let's name the dog Hopper. And I was like, yes, let's do it.
Yeah.
And then as soon as we did, I was like, it's Hopper from Wheel of Time, not from Stranger Things. Let's get that straight right now.
I love that. Yes, that would be the retcon. Yeah. No, it's for Wheel of Time, actually.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's a really good dog name too, right? Like it is.
Absolutely. There should be more dogs named Hopper. I don't know why there isn't. Hopper and Stepper. Those are good names for dogs.
Yeah, totally. There's Timber.
Yeah, Timber just got home.
And Timber's a great name for a dog.
Hi.
Yes. All my stuff is out in the garage. This is not fair. I did not smoke for this because I wanted to be straight, and here you guys are flaunting my face.
Sorry.
Well,
we operate stoned. All the podcasts are recorded. Well, not all of them. We have gone through phases of not smoking weed, but the last several.
Yeah.
Hey, every Sweet Shot of Time is guaranteed to be full of marijuana users every time. So no doubts there.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure from the beginning, me and Patrick were always a little stoned. Also very drunk.
Oh yeah, and drunk. Yeah, you guys got audibly drunk.
Yeah, like we announced the getting drunk. Yeah, there were some episodes where Because right now I'm pretty much I'm sober. I don't drink anymore, right? So
yeah, I don't drink either.
It's just been a thing where it doesn't feel good anymore.
I only drink on the weekends, which includes Friday.
My wife has podcast with me twice, and both times she's drinking just to kind of loosen up. And it helps her a lot because you can hear in both of her episodes that she's in. Like, she starts out great, and then by the end, she's like hilarious and like she's like getting better and better as the podcast goes. So I encourage that.
And part of me, wonders, is there something that I'm missing out on by not drinking during the episode? And is there a certain amount of lightness? But then I go back and listen to the episodes where I was really drinking, and I go, nope, they're better this way. I'm good. I'm totally good.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?